Sports Dialogue podcast host Paul Edwards.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sports Dialogue Podcast. My name is Paul Edwards, and I'm your host. And I'm here today to discuss the NBA playoffs, Western Conference Finals, Game 6, and give my brief perspective on Game 7. Before I discuss Game 6, I'd like to, as always, play back for you a little bit of what I said my keys were for both teams in Game 6, OKC and the Spurs. And I'm going to play you highlights of Game 6, and then I'll be back to discuss what happened in Game 6. For Game 6, what are my thoughts? Obviously, start with OKC. They haven't showed any fatigue as yet, but, that can happen quick for both teams because now they're into Game 6. And, okay. So we don't know when the fatigue is going to really take hold or if it will. As I said, I did see a little bit of it at San Antonio. But in terms of Game 6, I think that OKC needs to shoot just like they've been shooting, absent Game 4, where they shot 33% overall and 18.2. If they shoot up around 47.8 and 44.3 for the three-point line, and 48% or so to 50% overall, they have a good and don't show fatigue. Even with the injured players, they have a good shot at winning in San Antonio. What San Antonio needs to do is, in my opinion, establish Wimby. He needs to get back to his Game 1 form. Wimby has to score, I would say, 30 plus, definitely 30 plus, 30 to 40. And San Antonio needs definitely 30 plus, if not 40 plus. And San Antonio needs to get at least 5 other players in double figures with them. The Spurs, they need to fight through any fatigue level, shoot a little bit better than they have, around that 40%. They have to shoot a little bit better than that, I think, to make it easy for themselves. If they could shoot 45% overall and 35% from 3, I think they're in good shape. If they do that and Wimby gets 30 plus, and the fans in in San Antonio are going to be loud, and it's going to be electric, and that usually gets the players to another level. That's the Spurs' path to win. I am going to pick the Spurs because they're home. And I think that Wimby will score 30 plus, and they'll get 5 other players in double figures. We'll see a Game 7. And I am going to pick the Spurs because they're home. And I think that Wimby will score 30 plus, and they'll get 5 other players in double figures. And we'll see a Game 7.
Kane attacking Fox. He had space because Wimby was away. Comes over to get a block. Kept alive to Holmgren for 3. Young says, I don't need anything here. We'll go one-on-one. Holmgren's waiting. Wimby's turning. For 2. 3 of 3. 8 points.
John Bosco came before Game 4. Had a blessing for Luke Cornet on the sideline. Cornet had his best game of the series. Of course, they were invited back for 6. Wembanyama. Okay.
Is there another one? Fox lines it up. Air ball. Chad Penning saves it. 1 second difference in the clock. Wimby. Castle. Got it. Just beat the clock. Fox secures it between 2 defenders. Castle finds Bryant out of the corner. To the basket.
Man, I used to be able to jump like that when I was dunk on the 8-feet dunker.
And Vassell does the same. And he barks at Holmgren. And here he goes, 7-4, running the floor. Castle, Chad Penning. It was a lopsided first quarter, lopsided third. Wimby, the block. And a quarter, even when they were caught napping at the end, San Antonio makes the play.
They're going to do it. Look at the middle. Look where Harper is. Wide open flash, too.
That's a zone breaker.
Yeah.
Rich Johnson would love to see his team keep the pedal down. Cornet! Who's the finish?
Okay, so you saw what I said regarding OKC and the Spurs, what I felt that they had to do in game 6. And you saw the highlights. So let's start with the Spurs. They won game 6 in San Antonio. So let's see how they did compared to what I said. I said that Wimby had to really score 30 plus. And if we take a look, Wimby scored 28 points. So he was right around that 30-point mark. He came out scoring in the first half. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he had 22 in the first half. I could be off a point or two. But that would mean he only had 6 in the second half. I did notice some fatigue in Wimby, and that's primarily because he's really, really putting it all out there. I watch him carefully, not only on offense, but I watch him on defense. He's not only blocking shots, rebounding, and rim protected, he's actually guarding on the perimeter. When the ball gets reversed and he has to rotate, he's rotating out on OKC players shooting 3-point shots, and he's getting out there, challenging. He may not block it, but he's challenging it, trying to make it difficult. So I see that that's got to be weary on any player. And I do see that he is wearing down at points in the game. And I think that San Antonio's coach is doing a good job in getting him out of the game to give him some rest. And, they did pretty well in giving him rest, but you could see the drop off in scoring in the second half. So we do have to be careful with Wimby, because, he's really going all out, and that could really create a fatigue problem for him. So that means his backup has got to deliver, and he has. There's no question about that. Luke Cornet, if I'm not mistaken, he doesn't necessarily have to score, but, a lob here, a lob there, dunk there, but defend and rebound while Wimby's on the bench. And I think he's doing a good job of that, and he has to keep it up in game 7 if, in fact, that the Spurs have a chance to win. I also said that you heard me say that the Spurs not only had Wimby needs to score 30 plus, the Spurs needed to get at least 5 other players in double figures. And that's critical because, you need scoring from different players. And let's see, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, almost had 5 other players in double figures. Johnson had 9 points, not 10. Vassell 12, Champagny 10, Castles 17, Wimby 28, and Harper 18, and Johnson 9. So they almost had 6 players, which I thought that they needed to get 5 other players in addition to Wimby. So they were almost there on what I said. And Wimby was almost at 30 points. And as far as their scoring, I did indicate that, as you heard me say, they needed to shoot about 45% overall from the field and about 35% from the 3-point line. And by the way, both teams got up almost an equal amount of 3-point shots. I think OKC had 41 and the Spurs had 40. So they're shooting, they're letting it fly from 3. And I felt that the Spurs needed to shoot 35% from 3-point land and 45% overall. And they shot 46%. 46.6% overall, and 36.6% from 3-point land. So they hit all the markets. Wimby had 30. You want to say 6 guys in double figures, and they shot over 45% from field goal percentage and 35 from 3-point land. So let's now and they won the ball game. Let's take, we'll get to game 7 in a minute. Let's see what Fox had. Let's take a quick look. He had 5 points, and I think that he's coming off that ankle injury, so I don't know how much that's affecting him, and he may have developed a little rust while sitting out, but, he's a big part of that team, and he's very capable. And if they're going to have a legitimate shot of winning Game 7, I think Fox, his point production, he hustles. There's no question about that, plays defense. His point production is going to need to be increased. He's a double-figure guy, easy. He's capable of taking the game over. So that's something I'm going to be watching for. But before we get to Game 7, let's take a look back. You heard what I said about OKC. I thought OKC at home in Games 1 and 2 shot it in Game 1, 47 points from the field overall and 37% from 3. And in Game 2, 47.9 overall and 36.1 from 3-point land. So they shot it pretty well at home. In Game 2, overall, they went up almost 8 percentage points in shooting percentage, and they won that game at home. And then in Game 3 away, they shot 48%, 0.1, and 42% from 3-point, 44% from three-point land. So in games 2 and 3, they shot at 47 and 48% overall, which is almost 50%, and 36% in game 2 and 44% in game 3 from three-point land. So they shot it pretty well in game 2 and 3, but in game 4, as I said earlier, they only shot 33% from the field, and they only shot 18.2%. And then going in, you heard me saying, going into game 6, if they shot it the way they shot it in games 2 and 3, they meaning OKC, I thought they had a good chance of winning. And if that was a one-off in game 4, but it seems it wasn't, because in game 6, OKC shot 37.2% overall and 25% from three-point land. And you remember, in games 2 and 3, they were 48% overall. And in game 2 and 3, they were 36 and 44% respectively in games 2 and 3 from three-point land. And they got down to 25 in game 6. So they didn't do what I felt they needed to do to win, particularly shooting. Their hustle is definitely there. There's no question about it. I mean, that team hustles, and they play defense, but they didn't shoot the ball well. So that's looking back at what happened in game 6 as to why I believe the Spurs won. The Spurs hit the mark. And these are just my opinions. When I, set out my keys and marks, I'm sure everybody has their keys and marks. But, I was fairly accurate, as far as what I said both teams needed to do. So with that said, let's take a look at game 7 going into OKC tomorrow, which is Saturday. I think that's going to be a good game. There's no question about that. Let's talk about OKC first. I think if, you have experience in watching the NBA, whether you played or not, you just have a good knowledge of the game, you'd probably have to say, both teams are very good, very competitive, very talented, almost equally matched, if not very close to being equally matched. But you would say, you couldn't argue with someone that says, hey, listen, OKC is favored going into game 7. OKC has the edge because they're at home. That crowd really gets behind them. They play better at home. You can see that they shoot it better at home. On the road, game 4, as I said, game 4 and game 6, they shot 33% overall in San Antonio in game 4 and 37% overall in game 6. And if you look at game 2 at home and game 5 at home, in game 2, they shot 47.9%. They meaning OKC and 48%. So they're shooting about 48% at home overall. And then from the three-point land in game 2 at home, they shot 36.1%. And then in game 2 and then in game 5, they shot 43.8% from three-point land. So in game 2, they shot 36% from three-point land, and in game 5, 43.8%. And then in game 2 at home, they shot 47.9%, which is 48% at home, which is almost making half their shots. And in game 5, they did the same thing at home, 48.2%, which is almost making half of their shots. So they shoot better at home, OKC, is the point I'm trying to make. And they play defense, particularly in this series. I don't know what they're over the entire year, where they shoot better at home, and I suspect they do. I'm just referring to this particular series. They shoot better at home. They play defense. They're very handsy. They're tough. And I think what really bodes well for OKC, besides, their starters are going to do what the starters are capable of doing. Shea's going to get his. There's no question about it. Olgrim, Hartenstein with that push shot. They're there. There's no question about it. And, Dort, he's a big shot maker. He's a tough defensive player. But from my opinion, what could push it over the edge for OC is that bench. Specifically, Alex Caruso comes in and he's very effective. Carson Wallace, very effective, particularly on defense, Mr. Wallace. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he puts his body in there and he gets his hands on the ball. And then McCain, he just comes in firing. So when the starters go to the bench, and Jalen Williams, when he's left open, if he knocks down those 3-point shots, they're very tough. And I'm not even talking about J-Dub because the injury we're not so sure. I'm not so sure. I'd be talking about him a lot more if he's not injured. But I don't know what injury level he's playing with, what pain he's playing with, what percentage of health he is, whether he's 50%, 75%, 80%. I don't know. But it seems as if they're doing well with him not there. They would obviously do better if he was there, but they're doing well. And so I think that if those are the strengths of OKC. I think that the Spurs, looking at the Spurs, they're a young team. They have a lot of veterans on the bench, and they're a hungry team, and they're a very aggressive team. They shot in game one, when Wimby had 41 points, they shot 42% from the field and 30% overall. I don't think that will cut it in game 7, because unless OKC shoots the way they did in game 4 and game 6 in San Antonio, they're going to shoot, OKC is going to shoot around 48, 49 at home, based upon what they did in game 2 at home and what they did in game 5 at home. They shot, call it 47.9, which is 48% in game 2, and in game 5, 48.2%. And then from three-point line, 36 and 43% respectively in game 2 and game 5. So they're going to shoot it around 48%, unless something happens, and then so you're going to either see the 48% and the 44% shooting from OKC, or you'll see that 33% and 18% that we saw in San Antonio. I think you're going to see probably what they've done at home in this series. So the Spurs need to shoot it comparably. The Spurs need to carry that Game 6 performance on the road to OKC, meaning they shot 46.6% in San Antonio in Game 6 overall, and 36.6% from three-point land. If they can carry that into OKC and get Wimby, and he's got to be rested, there's no question about it. I see where you're going to have to rest him. So Cornet's going to have to give some pretty good minutes to back it up. But if we get Wimby with 30-plus, he's got to go 30-plus again for the Spurs to win. And that's a tall task. This is Game 7. OKC, if I'm not mistaken, they go 10 deep. If I'm not mistaken, I see primarily the Spurs go 9. So I don't see the fatigue in the Spurs as yet. OKC. I did see a little bit in the Spurs, not as a whole, but as I said, I saw some fatigue in Wimby, and so everything would point to OKC prevailing in Game 7. Everything meaning the depth, the bench, they're at home, the crowd, how they shoot at home versus on the road. So it's a tough call on my part. But I've been having a tough time saying the Spurs are going to lose. They just seem to shoot the ball. They just, they in the games that they lost in OKC, they were down and they cut it to 10, they cut it to 8, but they just weren't able to get over the hump. And but they challenged in those games. And even when they weren't shooting well, they were still challenging. So I think that if the Spurs can shoot 45% from the field, if they can shoot at least 35% from three-point line, Wimby gets 30-plus points. And again, De'Aaron Fox has to score in Game 7. He's got to be, I think it needs to be a 20-plus game for him in Game 7. I mean, he's very capable of it. And 5 other players, totally, other than Wimby, in double figures. I think you see the Spurs moving on. So I am predicting an upset in Game 7. The San Antonio Spurs will beat a very, very, very deep, well-coached, talented Oklahoma City Thunder team and organization. Those are my thoughts. As always, please remember to exercise, get your exercise in. It's good for your mind and your body. I know we're always busy and there's just so much to do. And, it's very easy to say, well, I'll get it done tomorrow. And then tomorrow I'll get it done the next day. But, just try to make it a priority. Prayer is my top priority, faith, and I try to get exercise second. And after that, then everything else falls in line, after that. So I'm just encouraging everyone. I mean, I could be silent about it, but I'm just trying to encourage everyone to exercise and stay in good health. So looking forward to the ball game tomorrow, and then I'll be back in another episode to preview the NBA Finals. Thank you. God bless you.
The Truth Plan shows us how to help to eliminate the inequities in affordable housing, unemployment, healthcare, education, the media, small businesses, access to capital, and much more. The Truth Plan also shows us how the elimination of these inequities also benefits the higher income community. The goals and objectives for equity are crucial in addressing the disparities that exist in our society. A primary focus must be on eliminating the racial, wealth, and equity gaps that disproportionately affect low-income and minority communities. This involves a comprehensive approach that includes ensuring access to affordable housing, improving employment opportunities, and enhancing healthcare access for underrepresented groups. By prioritizing these areas, we can create a more equitable foundation for all individuals, regardless of their background or economic status.
The Truth Plan is a self-help plan to eliminate the racial, wealth, and equity gap that exists between the low-income, the middle-income, the Black and brown communities, and the higher-income communities. The Truth Plan believes that all communities should prosper. The success of the Truth Plan will help to eliminate the inequities between the aforementioned communities in the areas of affordable housing, unemployment, healthcare, education, the media, small businesses, access to capital, and more. The higher income communities will also benefit. Prosperity for all. Never settle for less.